All right.
Got plenty to do.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right. We're going to call this meeting to order. Today is May the 15th, 2018. It's a special meeting of the Board of Education. And we do have, what's that? I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have, I think a couple folks have commitments outside the building tonight. So we'll try to move it along. We do have one speaker on the speakers list. Is that right, Madam Clerk? Mr. Scanlon? I didn't see, oh, there he is. All right. Come on up, Mr. Scanlon.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Commissioners, Superintendent Dean Williams. My name is Emmett Scanlon. I'm the Education Policy Analyst with the Children's Agenda, a local policy and advocacy organization that focuses on all systems that support the health and education of children. This year, the Children's Agenda conducted its first analysis of the Rochester City School District budget. We looked at the areas of special education, early childhood, social emotional health and learning, bilingual education, and the transparency of the document as a whole. I want to thank the board and the administration, as well as district staff, for welcoming this project and the time and information that you provided to us in answering questions. This first year was a learning experience, and what we found was a great deal of complexity and a lot of upheaval and constant change within the budget. But our goal moving forward is both to broaden and deepen the conversation about the Rochester City School District budget. And actually the reason I am here today is to deliver over 350 petitions signed by parents and city residents that support the Children's Agenda's recommendations, specifically for bilingual and special education. And these petitions were actually just collected over the past 2 weeks and reflect the efforts of individual parents. Particularly, I'd like to call out Waylani Olivo, who by herself gathered over 100 signatures. And I know many of these recommendations are already underway, are in development. At this late stage, also, it will be difficult to make any major changes. However, I thought it important to present these to show that there is broad community support for these efforts, and just to briefly revisit the recommendations right now. So the first, looking at bilingual education, is to stabilize the bilingual education department. This means that the director's position has been somewhat unstable over the past few years, and to relook at that position and find a way to empower it and to have possibly at a higher ASAR grade and a breakout budget for bilingual education. Second, there needs to be a permanent bilingual academy, and I know that those efforts are already underway, and many great things I'm hoping, looking forward to seeing from that. And third, to really have a strategic plan for all seats across the district when it comes to bilingual education. There's not enough capacity to serve all bilingual students, and we have to make sure that we have proper staffing. And I know the budget calls to add a large amount of bilingual staff, but it will be difficult to fill those positions, and so there should be a great effort on recruitment. For special education, I know there's more to come today that you'll be discussing, but in alignment with those recommendations that will be presented to you, we also believe in aligning the continuum of special education services. So, well, I'm the only speaker, I can go over a little bit, right? Aligning the continuum of special education services, program and services that best meet students' needs should be consistently available across school buildings. Every program or building change for a student with disabilities is disruptive to the learning process. To align different programs for so many students across such a large school district is very complicated. This requires a comprehensive multi-year plan with parent and community input. While all programs cannot be available in every building, there should be a good faith effort to make availability more predictable and consistent. Second, consistent mandatory professional development. Issues with compliance, student placements, and quality of instruction are all impacted by a lack of consistent professional development. Every staff person interacting with students with individualized education plans should have the proper training to support those students and to understand a tiered system of interventions and supports. And finally, address disproportionality in suspensions. Students with disabilities continue to be suspended at higher rates than their general education peers. Suspensions are harmful to a student's academic progress and should only be used as a last resort. It's important that all suspensions of students with disabilities are reviewed to ensure those students are not being removed from the classroom for behavior consistent with their disabilities, and more work must be done on the prevention side, including proper placement of students, social emotional supports, and training for staff. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to building on this year's work.
Thank you. Barbara, we're going to get a budget presentation. You and your staff.
I want to thank Everton and his team, as well as the entire team, and many, many of our colleagues and parents, community members who have put forth a lot of effort and having a conversation about keeping the budget focused squarely on schools, school improvement and students, and to mitigate as much as possible the lack of resources that we continue to advocate for on behalf of children in Rochester. So Everton, thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. To President White and Vice President Powell and the commissioners, and to everyone who is present here today, I just wanted to say thanks to all of you who have participated in the budget process, especially to the budget team that has, Superintendent had mentioned, has spent endless nights and weekends going through the budget process to make sure we present a budget that is balanced to the executive cabinet, who have worked diligently with their staff in the schools and the departments to make sure that we have a budget that we put forward that supports the students, while at the same time having a central office department that is running efficiently to make sure that resources are used in such a way that the students get all the support and service they need. So I'm going to be going through a very small presentation. And I know the commissioners have this presentation in their hand. But just wanted to go through, from a process point of view, just talk a little bit about, what we did, how we did it, from starting with the enrollment number and going through the staffing, making sure all the schools are adequately staffed. We worked with our chiefs, who in turn work with the principals and community partners. And we had open forums, outreach to the community to see what is it that they would like to see in the budget. We took all of that and we rolled it in as much as we could. So we're going to go through each of the pieces. We're not going to repeat what was done at the March 27th meeting. So as you look at where our budgetary actions took us on page 3, you'll see where we had state funding and federal funding. We made sure, as it relates to Part 100, Part 154, and Part 200 of the requirement, to make sure that students are getting what they need. Again, we added more reading teachers, intervention teachers to the school, counselors, social workers, special ed teachers. And I want to just make a note here that there was special attention given to special ed. There was a report that came in to the special ed department from, I think it's CPAC, and just wanted to let the commissioners and everyone know that from that input that came from the team and the community, we funded everything that was presented in that request, especially as it relates to North Star. We bumped up the North Star staff by about 10.7 FTE to make sure that the services that they will be providing to the students for this coming year, that we have enough staff adequately funding to provide the service. We went back also for special ed. We added case positions back in the budget, 13 positions to a tune of about $1.5 million. We also added 10 behavioral specialists to make sure that the special ed department is adequately equipped and resourced to meet the needs of our students with disability. We also added 14.8 FTE for ESO, and that's to make sure that the students who are not English non-learners, English language learners, no, it's not that. They changed the name to ENL. So the ELL, English non-learners, Egypt as a new language, sorry. But we would call ELL, that they are adequately funded, because we know that we have students coming in not just from Puerto Rico and the hurricane-infected area, but also from other countries, immigrants coming from other countries. So as we look at that, and then we made sure that everything was adequately funded. As it relates to our enrollment, I just wanted to keep iterating that over the years, our enrollment, student enrollment has been going down significantly. But this year, we saw a climb in our enrollment as a result of students coming in from hurricane-impacted areas. I think we have almost 600 students from Puerto Rico and other hurricane-impacted areas, so we see an upturn. We also saw an upturn, a small upturn in our pre-K numbers, which is a good indication as we go forward, because if our pre-K is going up, that means over the years our kindergarten and our other grades will grow as well. This is a trend of our charter school, and some individual may wonder why we put in charter school up there, because every time we lose a student to a charter school, it costs us on average about $13,000 up to a potential $16,000, $17,000 per student that goes to charter school. So we need to be very cognizant of the fact that we as a district are doing some tremendous things, and we have to make sure that we publicize that, just like the charter schools are doing, so that we have good services that we're providing our students. As it relates to the budget and the staffing, on page 6, you will see our staffing as you compare the 2017-18 numbers to the proposed budget for 18-19. We have gone up by 195.51 FTEs, with 111 of those being teaching staff, administrators by 8.5. And if you remember, I talked about increasing cases, but they're also offset on other administrative positions. Civil service position by 50.3, and teaching assistant 21.4, and paraprofessional by 4 FTEs. On the next page, you will see where we have our dollars, projected revenue, and expenditures. Our general fund revenue increased by about $30 million. Special aid revenues went down by $15 million as a result of grants going away. Many of those grants were in some of our persistently struggling schools, and because of what we were doing in those schools, we decided to carry many of those, if not all of those positions in the general fund, because we know that the service that we are providing to these students are very important. So we did not, what we would normally do many years ago is if the grant goes away, the positions go away. But because of the need of these positions, we carry them because we want to make sure that we continue delivering the services to the students that are really in need of those services. As it relates to school food services, a marginal increase of about $460,000. So as we look at our general fund expenditures, we know that those balance. So the next page I want to go to is to talk about where our funding is coming from. And that on page number 8, you'll see where our foundation aid went up by $12.5 million. Formula aid went up by 8.55. Building aid went up as well. And these are the sources of our revenue. One of the things I'll be talking to closer to the end is how the budget changed from the draft budget to where we are today. But this, as I'm going through this, is just talking mainly about how the budget has changed year over year. As it relates to our expenditures, you'll see where our expenditures are changing. Salary line, other compensation, you will see where our salary line went up by $17 million. And I just wanted to make sure we point out where our expenditures are going. Certain other pieces that we have, as you look at this document, page number 9, one of the things that you have to, I want to make sure that I explain is, as we look at the budget, our general fund is where our budget gap comes from. All our special aid fund is self-balancing. All our food service fund is self-balancing. So when we talk about our budget gap, it pertains specifically to the general fund. And all the other benefits that we see here, employee benefit, debt service is going up. On page number 9, on page number 10, wanted to highlight some of the features as to where the expenditures are increasing. As it relates to salary and compensation, we had a 3.61% increase in salary rate. We also had increases in FTEs as it relates to special aid. We have increases that relates to the ESO. We also have increases that we have put in the budget as it relates to attendance clerk positions, what we call homeschool assistants. We put them as homeschool assistants. Those are in the budget as well. So we made sure that the budget had everything it needed to support the schools. There was no reduction in the schools. At one point in time, we were balancing the budget. We wanted to make sure that we balanced the budget. So there's a document that was sent out to the commissioners that I took the liberty of cutting some positions. After having discussion with the chiefs, they explained the importance of those positions. So we added those positions back in, and we took the resources from other areas in central office to make sure we balanced the budget. I wanted to make sure that everybody understand we stayed away from the schools. The schools got what they need, and all the requests that they had, we are funding those schools. So as it relates to other areas of the budget, debt services, again, going up because of our FMP. We also see our cash capital going up. Facilities and related expenditures, that went up marginally. And our benefits, that includes all of our health, all of our social security, all of our taxes, we saw marginal changes in those. So on page number 11, we will see where we have the budget gap. And then it's after this page I want to explain to the board and to the community how we basically closed the budget gap. Originally, our expenditures were 819 million. The reduction that we have put in so far is about $41 million, taking us to a $778.6 million. Again, that's just the general fund. We do not include the grant fund or the school service fund when we're talking about budgeting, balancing the budget, because those are self-balancing funds. We did increase the amount that we appropriated from our fund balance. In the draft budget, we had $10 million. The decision was made by the executive management team to use an additional $10 million to balance the budget. And with that, our budget is balanced at a rate that was tremendously the effort of all involved. There is another document that I sent to the commissioners that I wanted to walk you through now, and it's called Change in the Budget. If you can turn to that document. It's not on the screen, sorry to all those who are looking on. But as it relates to our revenue, so let's start out with our revenue. In our original budget, we had revenues in our general fund of $757 million with a $10 million fund balance, causing our general fund to be $767 million. That document was sent to you, commissioners, earlier, but if you would like, I took the liberty of preparing for anyone who didn't have that. So this is the closure. So we started out with $767 million in our revenue, and that was prior to the governor's budget. So after the governor's budget, we got an additional $6 million in foundation aid, and there are a couple other small changes that happened in several other aids. Special service aid went down by $26,000. Special education public high-cost aid went up by $670,000. And, we had different puts and takes in that, but the net of those were very marginal. The other large item that we have was the building aid. And on this document, you see where a building aid went down by $9.7 million. Just before early this morning, we got a notification from our auditors that we were looking at some things, and they realized that in our building aid and in our charter school supplemental aid, that there was an additional $3 million that we had to switch. So we made that switch, but it's still in our revenue, just taking it from one area and putting it down into the other. So in the document that I sent to each of you, I talk about the changes that's included in that number. So net, it's $1 million that our general fund aid increased by, bringing us to $768 million. The additional $10 million for the appropriation gave us a total amount of general fund revenue of $778 million. And that is exactly where we are right now. So what we had to do, we had to go in and make reduction to all our expenditures to align to our general fund revenue. So as you look at that document, again, starting out at $819 million with a $778 million, we had to balance the budget for $41 million. And this is what has changed since the draft budget. On the sheet that you have before you, you see all the things that we did in terms of repurposing positions. Those ELA and math positions, they were a part of Title I. Took those positions out, so that freed up money for the general fund. We have items that we call vacancy turnover. And vacancy turnover is basically when a position has been vacant, it's remained vacant for a period of time. If no one is hired, then that funding goes right and roll back into the general fund. So we built in vacancy turnover factor. When you do a budget, you do that, as well as when a position becomes vacant, it takes a while for that position sometimes to get filled, so we have what we call that vacancy turnover. And sometimes we get breakage from that, where if a teacher retire at a high salary or anyone retire at a high salary, when you hire a new teacher or a new position, it's usually at a lower salary amount. So before you, you have all those puts and takes that went into balancing the budget. The document you have before you explained in words what the numbers are saying. Okay? And I wanted to just talk to them briefly. Again, teachers' salary and compensation, that went down as a whole because of my vacancy turnover. The factor is, when we calculated the vacancy turnover rate, my plan was to only use the smallest amount of vacancy turnover that I could use. Based upon a recommendation of one of our consultant, who was a former CFO for Buffalo, we went to the marginal amount in the budget, but as we did the analysis, we realized that that was not the case for Rochester. So we had to realign that. As it relates to substitute teacher costs, that went down because one of the things we're doing, we're making sure that our positions are well staffed in the district. The Human Resource Department has gone through and done the hiring. So the need for additional substitute is going down. Because one of the things that we need to know, we need to point out at this point in time, there are positions that are vacant. If we bring in a substitute for that position, the money is sitting in the FTE that is vacant. So there is no need to budget that in two places. As it relates to teacher hourly and teacher in services, again, many of those are after-school teacher board resolutions that we put through. The goal of the district is to not having those funded through general fund. We always go for the grants to make sure that any additional pay that we're paying teachers to do services, we put those through the grant. We do have a small amount in our general fund, but we are trying to minimize that as much as possible. So most of the board resolutions that comes to the board for additional pay for teachers, if you notice, they are always grant funded. But again, there are a few of those that come through general fund, but we are trying to manage that as much as possible. And as it relates to in-service, we are going to be moving forward to make sure that services are done internally rather than going outside. You know, you hear the superintendent mention that we're building our own internally, so as we do those, then the need for additional cash to go outside is reduced. The teacher and employee retirement system went down from the budget by about $3.7 million because as we went back and analyzed the FTEs, everything is based upon the FTEs that we are putting through. And when we check with what our actuals are, we realized that going into the budget, we budgeted for an amount that was higher than what we anticipated. As we did the analysis, we changed those to match to actuals. Health, again, it's the same thing. If you notice, when we did the projection, the market is up by about, for self-insured, by about 5.5%. Our broker came in and said that was conservative, but there was no need to go for 5.5, even though that's what the market was saying. Because we are self-insured, he said that 4.29% was more consistent with where we are. So that's one of the benefits of being self-insured. If you go to Excelis on the market, they're seeing like 15, 16, 17% increase in healthcare, which is something that we're not seeing. So right before you, you have all the puts and take. One other large item I wanted to note, you'll see a reduction in computer software for about $2.5 million. That is for teaching and learning, where that was added to the general fund, but we are applying for a grant that would be funding that, so we took it out of the general fund. So we went in and we took out everything that was in, that we found out some of them are grant funded as we get the grant. Some of them, the ask were more than that what we could afford, and we made some reductions. And again, we're making the reductions to the school. So as a result of all those, our budget has balanced. One of the questions that came up about BOCES as well, I wanted to address that right now, is that as we work with the special ed department, one of the things that you heard me mention is that we have increased behavioral specialists. We have increased special ed teachers. And as I talked with them, they said the savings will come when we start doing the service in-house and not relying so much on BOCES. We spend about $33 to $35 million with BOCES. So as we start doing more of that in-house, we'll see where the reduction is going to come into from BOCES. So that's where you see the BOCES change. Also, one of the things we changed was we took out a $3 million contingency that we had in the budget. And based upon, there was a discussion with Vice President Powell as the chairperson of the Finance Committee and with some members of the board, that we will not carry a contingency this year. And when the need arises through the year, if we do need extra funds, we will come to the board and the board will authorize that. So with that being said, our budget is balanced. Again, we have funded the schools. Schools has seen no reductions, and any reduction was coming from operations, coming from central office, and that's where we are with the budget.
Any questions? Commissioner LeBron?
Thank you. So, Everton, thank you very much for that presentation. So I do have a few questions specifically about some of the things that were addressed. But my first question is, we were here last night, for those who don't know, some of the Board of Elections, BOE members were here last night, and we ran into Everton, and he gave us this presentation on some of the changes, which I went home and read last night, reread it again this morning. One, to make sure that I fully understood what positions were being cut initially from schools. And then today you're presenting that you met with the chiefs today and that they told you they didn't want to make any cuts to the schools, even though this presented cuts. So my question is, why didn't these chiefs communicate this before today and last night? So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know if you will have an answer, Everton. I appreciate all the hard work you were doing. Everton was here really late last night and has been over the weekend working on this. But I definitely want to have that question out there. In terms of, there's a couple of areas where special education is being cut. So interfund preschool special education, $300,000. I need to understand that a little bit more. Summer school operations, which you didn't mention, it looks like $3 million in cuts for summer school. So I need to understand how that's actually going to impact our children for summer school. BOCES, I understand what you're saying, like as we build a team and we get in-house, but we don't have that team yet. So I need to understand how we're saying we're going to focus in on addressing some of the needs with special education, but then also at the same time cutting it in a backwards type of way. Contingency, I didn't really, well, I think you explained that part. And let's see. So that's it. That's all I have for right now.
Okay, so let me address each of those. As it relates to the chiefs, as of last week when we were doing the budget, we still had a budget gap. So as I was going through in my office to see how can I close that gap, we eliminated some positions. I took the liberty of eliminating some positions. When we talked with the chief, it wasn't this week, it was last Friday, we had a discussion and the chief says, Everton, these are needed positions. So we had a meeting and we talked about it and we said we will put those right back in the budget. So we put those back in the budget last Friday. It wasn't this week. So those are in the budget. Due to the timing of when we were putting it in the budget book, we put those in the reserve account. So there's no position that were actually taken out of the schools. They're in the budget and in the reserve position. So we restored all of those. So if you look in that document, and the third document that you have in that,
Yeah, you can keep explaining everything. I just want to know, because
yes,
what I was reading was that there were cuts throughout every school.
On the third document, if the memo that I sent out, the third document was where all of those positions were restored back in the reserve account. So there is no cut to the school. It says it's 18 positions. So all those are in the budget. All right?
Okay.
So that was
I'm sorry,
just,
Can you show us
Yeah.
what third document?
no, the other one. That was, the first one was the cut that I made, and the other one was where the positions were put back in. And then a memo, I sent out a memo to say what each of those are. So those are in the budget. Just want to make everyone aware of the fact that those are in the budget. If you look at that list, those are the top items on the sheet right above that.
Right.
So the first sheet was where I took the liberty of doing that. Having spoken with the chiefs, they said, no, Everton, we need to make sure that that is whole. So I send that back to the budget department and say, put those back in the budget. So those are in the budget.
Is that why we don't have a contingency allocation, a line?
No, the decision to eliminate the contingency was done. There was a meeting that was held, and Vice President Powell and some of the board members were in the meeting. I was actually driving from Albany from a conference, and the decision was made to not carry a contingency this year.
Why not? So let me ask some board members. Commissioner Powell, let me ask you, why did you not want to carry a contingency?
The ultimate contingency fund is our unappropriated reserves. When you have a contingency fund in your budget, what happens is the first time something comes up, they apply to use the contingency fund. So that by putting a contingency fund in the budget, you're introducing an undisciplined approach to spending. If a genuine emergency were to arise, as Everton said just before you walked in, the administration would come to the board with a specific budget amendment request to handle the emergency.
So where would the funds come from?
Our unappropriated fund balance.
And of which we have how much in that?
Right now, we have about $29 million.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question to what Commissioner Elliott is also asking? So are we using 10 million of that 29 million? Is that the additional fund balance appropriation, the 10 million?
Actually, we are using $20 million of it.
Oh, we're using 20 millions to cover this gap that we have?
Yes.
And so that was one of my questions from before, and I'm reading the answers. So I'll just read the response, that it's not good practice for any school district to continuously use their fund balance to balance their budget each year. If the district continues with its current practice of utilizing large amounts of unassigned fund balance to balance the budget each year without replenishment, it would take 3 to 5 years before the district will have drained its unassigned fund balance. And I'll stop there and I'll share this with whoever wants to see it later. So we're using 20 million and we have 29, that leaves us with 9. How are we, I'm not understanding. Plus we have budget gaps too.
Right, but that closes the budget gap. The 20 million closes the budget gap.
But then it reduces our unassigned funds by
And
$20 million.
unassigned fund balance is our savings that we have.
Right.
So a part of the board's policy, there's a board policy that talks about what the unrestricted fund balance needs to be. It can range between 5 to 15%.
Yep, it's on here.
When we take that out, our unassigned, our unreserved fund balance will be about 6%. Right now, it's about 8% because there are other fund balance that's there. It's not just the unassigned fund balance.
Right.
The policy says that our unrestricted fund balance needs to be between 5 and 15. Right now, we are at 8.11. I made sure to check it before I come, 8.11%. And when we take this out with the intention that when we close out this year, we put back about 2.5, maybe $3 million back in the fund balance, that would give us another about $11 million that we will have in the fund balance, which is going to give us about 6.5%, which is within the range of what the board policy is. So every time I decide to do those things, I recalculate what our unrestricted fund balance is going to be to make sure that we are in compliance with the board's policy, and we are in compliance with the board's policy.
So is it, what's the percentage of what?
Percentage of your general fund expenditures.
Okay, so not the total budget.
No, because again, you know, what I mentioned before is that your gap is based upon your general fund expenditures. So after we do this, and you'll see it in the memo that I sent, all the changes, it's going to be about $6-something million. And the guideline is that it should not be below 5%, so we are still within the range. If it does go up above 15%, the board requires us to make adjustments down to take it down.
So are there any layoffs?
At this point in time, there are no planned layoffs, but HCI can speak to that, but what will be happening is that if individual position has been taken out, then people will be repurposed into vacant positions that we have. But at this point, I do not believe there is any layoffs.
I don't know, did all of Commissioner LeBron's questions
Oh,
get answered?
No,
there is an
they haven't.
item that you call interfund, and basically what that is for pre-K. Pre-K is funded by grant from the state, and they have the CBOs. From time to time, there are some students in prior years, if they are 3-year-olds, they usually don't get funded, but now the state has kicked in pre-K down to 3-year-olds. So when we budgeted this, the amount that the grant fund would not pick up, that we would have to pick up, that went down because now the state is funding that. So what we would do, we'd always budget for an amount, what we call interfund. It's just moving it from one fund to the other.
Okay.
It's a reserve that when the pre-K budget runs out, then we pick it up in the general fund. But now that the state has decided to fund not only just 4-year-olds, they're also funding 3-year-olds. So the need for that much has gone down. So the grant is now paying for that.
And then BOCES and summer school operations?
Summer school operation, when we initially went in, we budgeted about, I think about maybe $12 million. And there is a request that I saw that came in from the person who was running summer school. And if I'm not mistaken, the number I saw was $8.3 million. So that's based upon that budget that I got from that we over budgeted. So if they're revisiting that right now, and any increase in summer school, what we're going to be doing is using Title I funding to pay for that, because what happened with Title I funding, unlike the school year, the Title I funding goes up until August. School year ends in June, so those 2 months we use Title I funding, and we can use that towards summer school. So the budget that we got from summer school was less than what we projected. We made those changes. I think there was one other item.
BOCES.
BOCES, and I mentioned about the BOCES. For the special ed, when I spoke with the special ed individuals, they said that Everton, you're seeing increases right now, but you're going to see savings in BOCES, in homeschool, and hospital service, because we are providing those services. So while we reduce, because we budgeted about $37 million, so we're taking it down by 3 to about $33 million. Right now, the expenditures for BOCES is running at about, for this year, about maybe $31 million. We bumped that up by about 3%, a small increase. So we have more than enough budgeted in BOCES. It's just that we anticipated that we'll be coming in at a higher rate, and actually the service is not coming in.
Commissioner Shepherd.
So, first of all, I do want to say thank you to the staff. I know that there's been a lot of work that has been put into this. But I do want to let you all know that I'm very concerned with the fact that we have to make a decision tonight, and a lot of the important information that we needed did not come until the last minute. And I'm up here trying to read through some of the stuff and listen to you at the same time and listen to my colleagues. And I hear you say that the schools, they weren't cut, and I'm looking through this. I looked at the document you told me to look at, and all the positions that I have highlighted that were affected are not on this document. I see School 41 is due to be closed down this year, and I see a whole slew of all the positions that were there that are taken out, but I don't know where they went to. So I don't understand where that money is going and what I would be voting on in regards to School 41 and those positions and the allocation of those funds. You also talked about our computer software and that we were going to use that money for something else because we put it in a budget and now it's not going to be in the budget and that it would come through a grant. But has that grant been accepted? Like, do we know that that money is going to come? Because if the money doesn't come through a grant, then where does that lead us in regards to what we're trying to do in our schools and moving forward with our software and in central office with our software? So, I mean, tonight, I'm not sure what will end up happening with the rest of my colleagues, but for me, I know that there's been a lot of work that has gone on, but tonight I'm just not prepared to vote yes to a budget, and there's all this information that I still have to read through to make sure that I'm able to stand behind my yes vote.
Okay. So if I could address school number 41, because school number 41 is closing, we had to take it out of the budget. So what we did is we took all the FTEs associated with school number 41, and there was a question that came in from the board during the question and answer, and there is a department that is in the chief's department that's called the reserve. It's the chief's budget, it's in their department. We took all the FTEs and we put them right over in that department. Because in taking them out of the budget, we can't just not fund them. So we didn't reduce them, we just took them out of the department code that says 41. And we put them in a department number 29905. So as you look at that department, and that question came in from the board during the question, all the positions went over in that department, and that's where we have those positions camping right now. So all of the staff that's needed, there's some additional staff was requested also by the chief. We included those because if we put them under the school department, then it would mean that we're carrying the school. And because we don't have a beds code for the school at this point in time, we don't have any department code for the school at this time, we camp it in this account. But all the FTEs relating to school number 41 is actually in the reserve account. So when the school gets named, when the state gives us the beds code, when we put a department code in, then we take all those positions and put them in that department. But at this point in time, we have nothing like that from the state, so we can't move. So that's where they are. As it relates to the software, this is a software that Teaching and Learning was planning on putting in the budget. And how that came up is because there was a grant that the sponsor came to us and say, this is something, and I wish, what's her name, Karen was here. They came to us and say, hey, this is something that we are using. If you decide that you want to go into a long-term agreement with us over a 3-year period, we will give you the ability to get a grant. They're applying for the grant for us and with us. And we've got a 60% discount with that, but we had to sign up with them. When the director was preparing her budget, she actually put that in error in the general fund. She actually put that in error in the general fund. So as I'm going through, I realized that it should not be in the general fund, but it should be in the grant. So as a result, I had to take it out of the general fund and put it in grant funding, because that's where it should be. I don't think she fully understood when she was preparing her budget, the difference between those. So as I look at computer software, because we get a fixed amount from the state for computer software. And as I'm looking, I realized that that was way over what we were going to get in aid from the state. When we dug deep in it, we realized that that was an item that she put in the general fund that should not be in the general fund. So as a result, we had to take it out. That's what that is.
Any other questions?
It was actually an error on the director's part. We fixed that.
Mr. President, I want to publicly thank Everton. I think that anyone in this audience would agree that his command of the issues is superb. I mean, from the ability to name the specific budget code to his explanation of essentially finding an error in the original budget presentation regarding the software, all of it reflects a very intimate knowledge of this budget book. I also want to thank the budget team. I had a pre-meeting with Everton earlier today and sort of suggested that I'd like to meet the folks from budget because the turnover, there were some folks I didn't know. And they came to the doorway and said, "What did we do wrong?" Well, of course, it didn't do anything wrong. I want to acknowledge them and thank them. You can stay seated. They want to stay anonymous. But I also want to acknowledge what Commissioner Shepard has said about the sort of teetering at the edge here, getting information at the last minute. I don't know that we've ever been through a budget season that has pressed the limits as this one has. And some of the recommendations that the change from first document to last that is presented here today in years past would have been done a long time, much earlier in the process. So by way of suggestion to cabinet and chiefs and senior staff, those who are still going to be here next year, I know some of you won't be by your own decision, that you journal what was done and when decisions were made, and then subtract 2 months. That's your timeline for next year. 2 months, at least. Some of the struggle that we had with closing the gap, if we start with an assumption of revenues for next year and war game, well, what happens if we don't get that much money? Or, you know, shoot for the moon, but then build a plan for what happens when the funds you hoped for aren't there. If you war game that out in December and January, then when the governor's budget comes out, there aren't any surprises. And you already have your game plan in a binder ready to be able to balance the budget and reduce all that stress that currently is sitting on Everton's shoulders. I can't believe how straight he's standing with all the weight that he's bearing there. There are ways of approaching this, you know, basic management and wargaming, and we cannot let another year go by without learning these vital lessons about, you know, bringing the project to closure on a more timely basis. And it should not rely, a process should not rely on your CFO to, not arbitrarily, but to unilaterally proffer cuts. Because then, of course, you get exactly what happened. You get the chiefs coming back saying, but we can't make those cuts. Well, you have to provide that information to your CFO early in the process, not at the last minute, so that he's holding his breath trying to figure out how to close that budget gap. You can't put that on one man and still call yourselves a team. So just as a, you know, a friendly suggestion for next year. And again, to the extent that you were able to pull this together, I commend all of you. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Funches?
Oh, I'm sorry. I will defer to Cynthia because she was first, and I'll go after Cynthia.
I appreciate the work that's been done in this budget process. I commend you and the budget director and your team. But as you know, I've said many times and will continue to say, we're going to have to renegotiate the contracts. We're going to have to renegotiate the legacy costs. We can no longer afford giving 3.7% or 3.2% at a budget line item of $20 million. Oftentimes, I've been here long enough to know that when we've gone to the state and asked for $20 million, that's been for salary increases. So at some point, unless we're going to start laying off people, and then if we're starting to lay off union members, I don't want to hear anybody's mouths. because we've got to look at how do we renegotiate, legacy costs, how do we renegotiate the fact that we're giving a 3.7% increase to every member who's in those unions, when in the market, nobody gets that kind of money. It would be nice if they didn't get a raise for 1 year. How much would that save us, and how much could we put back into those line items that impact our students and impact of the buildings? It just seems to me that we can no longer be selfish. The unions can no longer be selfish. I know that they are representing their members, but we can no longer be selfish. That we must look at how do we renegotiate the contracts such that we do have a balanced budget, and we're not coming in just, gripping whether or not we're going to balance this budget, and then we're balancing it off the back of the general fund. Somehow the unions have to take some of this too. And so while I may vote for it this time, I may not vote for it in succeeding years, because I don't see where the unions are helping to contribute to a balanced budget. And they've got to start to do that. And so I hope that they're listening, because no longer can we continue to give, if we're going to have a healthy financial budget, no longer can we continue to give a 3.7% raise to 6,000 people. It's going to drain us. Additionally, I also believe that people outside of here, meaning the state, are looking at us that we've got almost $1 billion, and certainly the community, that we have a $1 billion budget and we're still not able to educate proficiently the students in this district. So we're paying people that don't give us an academic rate of return, and that's problematic. Thank you.
Commissioner Funches.
Everton, I just want to say thank you again for all your yeoman's work. I want to echo what my other commissioners have said about you and your team and the work that you've put forth. I have just a question for clarity. You said that when you took down, because School 41 is closing, you took it down, all of the positions that would have been in 41 were moved into 29905, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm looking here, under 29905, it says high schools, and I'm wondering, I'm looking at these positions. Are all of these positions, so you're saying if I look at all these positions, I should see what is necessary to open up another school?
Yes, there are two reserve accounts, 19902 and 29905.
So are they
One is
all?
for elementary, one is for high school.
So 41, since it's reopening as an elementary school, it would not be in 29905. It would be in the other one, 199 what?
Some of it is in 29905.
Oh, some of it's here, and
Yes.
some of it is, and the rest of it is where?
If you look on
199.
page, right, if you look at page number 5 on your document,
Got it.
all the way down to page number 7, you'll see a whole lot of positions. Those positions that says elementary school, we can't hire people in those positions. It's just a reserve. So when the school comes on board, whether it be that school, what we have in those departments also is the bilingual program, bilingual academy, because right now we haven't made a final decision as to where it's going to be, which department it's going to get, how is that going to go. So those FTEs are in those departments. So as those decisions are made, it's just a matter of flipping them from one to the other with no impact on the budget, because we couldn't leave them off. And then if we left them off, when they come on, we have to come to the board and say, we need money. So it's better for us to budget them in those reserve accounts so that when the decision is made as to where the school is going to be located, department, then we can just do a flip and put them back into those areas.
Okay, and one other question.
Yes.
In regards to the BOCES, I know there were some questions that submitted around, and there was talk about students who are aging out of public education, and that would be part of the reduction to the BOCES cost?
They never gave me the detail. The special ed department never gave me the detail. They just, because as they're adding the positions to the budget, my question is, if we're doing these services, isn't BOCES providing the same service that we're doing? They said, Everton, you're not going to see it. We can't do it right now. But as the year goes through and we start implementing those changes and staff comes on board, So we may see less people going to BOCES as a result of less going to BOCES, then BOCES bill us for less.
Can I just ask a clarifying question to that? So what you're saying is that we're cutting BOCES before we actually have those services for special education students, before we even hire the staff, before they're trained. So we're cutting services to special education before, I mean, essentially that's what we're saying. We're budgeting for less students to go to BOCES on the premise that we're going to hire staff and they're going to take over those services that BOCES are providing.
Based upon the discussion with Keisha, she didn't give me the details behind it, but
Right.
that's where she said we wouldn't be getting the savings. Some of the BOCES reduction is also as a result of CTE. It's not just all special ed. There are CTE programs that we have in the district, and over the years we have been sending students to BOCES for CTE. We started out at 22, we went down to 15. Now that Edison is on board with their CTE program, now that East is on board with their CTE program, we're down to about maybe 5 students that we're going to be sending to BOCES. So we are doing those services in-house. So the BOCES is not only special ed, it's also CTE and other services that we provide. So it's a combination of all of that. It's not the number that you see that totally impact specialized services. It's a multiple array of things that.
But we don't know yet what that actually means in terms of.
Special ed?
Right, because you only got a generic answer in terms of we're going to see changes, but we don't know what those changes are that are going to cause savings.
I haven't gotten that plan.
Right.
But that's what, when I spoke with the executive director, that's what she.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that that's what I was understanding. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Understand.
I'm good.
Vice President Powell?
One more thank you to Mr. Scanlon from the Children's Agenda. He introduced his remarks saying it was a very complex budget, and so it is. But I found in his remarks that his understanding of the issues and the complexities was profound as well. I believe, I hope that we agree on this, that budgets being moral documents, that we are in agreement about what the priorities need to be. And hopefully, we have adequately addressed those priorities with our funding. And I ask Mr. Scanlon to stay engaged and continue to bring his outside eye and expertise to the table. I, for one, really appreciate it, and you can see all of the expertise that the work they've done with the city and the county is paying off as they look at our city school budget.
Yep, yes, ma'am.
I don't see the parent rep GC, and I'm sure that Commissioner Powell, who chairs the Finance Committee, thanked him, but I also want to thank him. This is his last year on the committee. His child graduates. So I just want to put on record that I appreciate his involvement, as I'm sure Commissioner Powell does. He's been around about 8 years, perhaps, a long time serving as parent rep and also a part of the Parent Advisory Council. So I just want to say congratulations to him and with, I don't know if it's a male or female student who's graduating, and much success to GC.
Everton, just a couple of quick questions. If you look at page 3, it says district budgetary actions. I just want to make sure I understand this chart, this PowerPoint page. It says, for example, special education teachers plus 39.5 FTEs. Then it has parentheses, 3.7. I'm not exactly sure. When I usually see parentheses, I think that means a reduction.
What page number you say?
Yeah, page 3 of the PowerPoint.
Page 3 of the PowerPoint.
It says district budgetary actions.
The first is the FTEs. Everything in parentheses is the dollar.
The dollar
amount.
associated with
Okay.
FTEs that we added in.
So just to make sure that I understand this, for example, in special education teachers, 39.5 FTEs, the cost for that had to be more than 3.7 million,
Just the salary.
just the salary?
Yes.
Okay, for 39 FTEs?
Yes, because it's about, it's roughly about $95,000, well, fully burdened.
Okay.
$95,000. So it's always equates to about
So I just want to make sure everybody understands what that means, that we added, you correct this characterization if I'm wrong, we added 39.5 employees to our special education staff.
plus the 13 cases,
Well, yeah, no, I get that, right?
plus the 10
Right?
behavior specialists.
And the counselors, yeah, absolutely. All right, all right. I got to tell you, I'm extremely happy about that. I know Commissioner Funches is, and I know our friend from Empire Justice are probably pretty happy to see that. Now, the question is in the follow-through, which we're going to get a bit of that in a few minutes, I hope. Then to Commissioner Shepard and Vice President Powell's question about the timeliness of these submissions. Everton, can you provide, sort of a lightning round kind of response? Why was it so late than what we're used to?
What we are used to is initially we did a presentation to the board in December, usually about December 19th, where we talked about the budget gap. We were in the process of working with the path forward. So there are certain decisions that we had not made as yet. So when we did the first presentation to the board, it wasn't until March. Actually, February when we were in this conference room, when we had that meeting, February 24th, we were presented what the budget gap was. So in working with the path forward and doing a lot of things, we didn't finalize certain things, so we were running behind about, as Commissioner Powell said, Vice President Powell, about 2 months. We were running about 2 months behind. So when we did the presentation in March, that was where we showed you the budget gap officially in the presentation, and at that point in time, we started to go on turbo boost to make sure we caught up with stuff. So it's not any one person or anything to be blamed, but it's just there was things going on with, as it relates to the path forward that we didn't plan, we didn't move forward because there's some decisions that we had to investigate and make sure we had all the facts before we moved on. So that's... Yeah.
So it's fair to say...
Sorry.
That's all right. It's fair to say that, sort of in response to Vice President Powell's statement, you probably can already see some things that you would do differently, or
yes,
maybe some challenges you wouldn't have next year that you had this year. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct.
And then one final thing, and it's going to sound like a broken record because I've said it before, but I really feel the need to say it again today. And I don't think this is an exaggerated term. Your presentation today was exemplary. I have never, and I've been here 10 years, hard to believe, I have never seen a budget, and we've had some very competent, capable budget directors. I have never seen a budget director be able to cross functions the way you have, to describe the things that are happening in different departments. Usually what happens is, you all have seen it, the budget director or the superintendent will call somebody up and say, okay, you describe that, you describe it. Not once did this man say, okay, come on up here, describe that. And while we probably would like to have some different things happen in this budget, I know there's some questions about contingency and so forth, under the circumstances, $65 million budget deficit is what you start off with. This is, as Commissioner Elliott says, this is almost $1 billion budget, and there is going to be some accountability for that. People are going to say, wait a second, you got $1 billion. What's the return on investment here? That is something that you're going to hear and we're all going to hear. But let me tell you today, again, this isn't hyperbole, this is an exaggeration. You are on the mark, because I have never seen anybody, and if we're going to build an effective team, we got to have people that can understand their teammates' function and what they're doing. And I challenge anybody out here, I'm going to say it again, to think of a budget director, budget chief that we've had, like yourself, who has been able to describe what's going on in this district. You never stuttered, you never hesitated, right? And I got to tell you, I am extremely happy and very proud on your presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Call the question, Mr. President.
All right. We have, I need a resolution, I need a motion to discuss Resolution 827. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
It would be my honor to move that.
Vice President Powell has made the motion to move Resolution 827. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Elliott. Any further questions or comments regarding Resolution 827? All those in favor of Resolution 827 say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Nay.
Yeah, I'm a nay too.
roll call? Very well, yep, that's fine. Vice President Powell,
Yes.
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner Funches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hallmark, sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner
It's a no for
Funches.
me.
I didn't call you just yet, you got a little bit too quick with that no.
Oh, okay, well, yeah, I just want
All right, Commissioner Shepard,
No.
and I vote yes. The ayes have it. Again, thank you, Superintendent.
Yes, thank you,
and,
Everton, and your
everyone.
staff
Thank you.
again. Seriously, truly appreciate all the work you guys have done.
Thank you.
All right, we do have another item on our agenda, and that is the presentation and report of the findings of the Special Education Advisory Committee. Commissioner Funches?
Yes. Dr. Lee, can I get the PowerPoint? Can the PowerPoint go up on the thing?
What's that? Oh, we don't?
I'm gonna do this now.
Oh, yeah, no, we were just talking
Okay.
about something from, sorry.
I'm sorry, I need communications assistance.
Okay.
Oh, you're trying to get it on the,
Yes.
the screen?
Yes.
There are copies of the communication.
Yes. Right,
Yep.
all right, so I just wanted everyone else to be able to see it as well.
Okay.
All right, but what I wanted to do, what I just wanted to do in this presentation, what we're doing is just talking about breaking down what the committee's charge was, what we did, the process we used, and what we came up with as a committee. So the committee's charge, we went to review the board's policies on educational programming and services. We went soup to nuts through all of the things that around special ed, and we were to propose solutions to the challenges faced across the district. This was this committee, which I'm very proud to say, this committee represented a cross section of our community. We had people from higher ed that worked in special education. We had parents, we had advocates, we had graduates of our district that were students with disabilities who had been through the IEP process as a student. And we had district staff, and we had some of our partners from other educational institutions such as Hope Hall and Norman Howard. What I feel is that this committee, because it was such a cross-section, it was deeply community-based, it offered our district staff a different perspective on how to meet the challenges that were set before us. So once we got into the room, we realized that the problem that we faced was huge and mammoth. So what we said is, this is a two-part process. So the phase one, which is what we're presenting to you now, is what we decided to do first, was to define the what. What were the things that needed to be fixed? What were the areas and what areas did they fall in? In this first phase, it wasn't anything about how we're going to do it. It's just what we're going to do. Because what we felt was, historically, one of the challenges was everyone went to how without necessarily first going to making sure we were clear on what. We always want to know how to fix a thing, but we don't even know if we have the right what yet. So we spent this time really breaking down the what. So what we did as part of that process, we reviewed all of the reports that had been done. We reviewed the Great City Schools report. We reviewed the Jane Elliott report. And we also got input we had input from parents, input from some of our partners, and all the other ways that we had gotten information related to what things were going on through our systems. And out of that process, in these 2 months, we were able to come up with a set of core recommendations. The recommendations are as follows: that we as a district will come into full compliance with all of our legal obligations within 3 years. We will enter into legally enforceable consent decree. The reason behind this is to make sure that this is something that is enforceable. This is not in any way to negate the collaborative process that we entered into with all the people at the table. This is just simply to say that we will commit to do this, and if we don't commit to do this, there is consequence. And so, and everyone in the table understood what this was, and it did not inhibit our collaborative process, because I want to say again, the community and the school district and all of us came together as partners to work through this process. And these are things that we should have been doing already. These are things that we need to do, and these are things that all people at the table have agreed that need to be done. So there's nothing special about the fact that we just need to fix it, and this is us saying that we're agreeing to fix it. Acknowledging the possibility of significant consequences for failing to meet the obligations set forth in the consent decree, setting aside funds in the 18-19 school year to retain an outside consultant to look at special education staffing. That was done. So during phase 2 of the work, which will span the summer and early fall, we are going to have the members of the committees will work in small groups and bring in other experts and other advocates, people, to develop specific recommendations on the how. This is where, in the different areas of need, what we're going to create work plans for each area, because to do it in this large scope was too much. So we're breaking it down into these different areas that are defined here. The first one is pre-CSE issues, including unnecessary classifications, the referral process, high quality, culturally appropriate assessments. There's a lot of things that we found that where we have kids who are being classified that don't need to be classified. There are things that kids not being appropriately classified, making sure that in that pre-CSE process, looking at 504 plans and all these other things, how do we make sure that that process is clean so the kids who are becoming classified are only the kids who actually need to be classified and that they are classified appropriately. CSE meetings and placement, including timely meetings that we address racial disparities and classifications, and we also take care of transportation. Part of that is also some very basic things around communication around CSE meetings, making sure that you get it in the language that you actually speak and read, and things of that nature. Appropriate programs and services, including the continuum of services, core academic curriculum, and MTSS. We want to make sure that in each of these, that in CSE meetings that people get placed correctly and with precision of fit between the need and what we provide to them. In appropriate programs and services, make sure that we have the continuum of services in district to do the things that we need to do that come out of the CSE. We have a specific group for autism, including evaluations and services for children on the autism spectrum, because we felt that the particular needs of this particular group of students warranted its own group. We have transition planning and services. Transition planning is a multi-year process that needs to be looked at and done effectively, so we separated that out as its own group. Student behavior issues, including disparities in discipline and suspensions, removals, and manifestations. Self-explanatory. Meeting the needs of English language learners, multi-language learners who also identified as students with disabilities. This group will handle we felt that again is a group to have separate to meet the needs of students with disabilities who are also not, whose English is not their first language, and to make sure that not only their language, their linguistic needs, but their cultural needs are met in the educational process. There is also another group that is not listed on here, which is working with parents. While we will have parents on every one of these groups, and we went to CPAC and solicited parents to work on these groups already prior to tonight. There is a separate group that's not listed, that's not on here, that is working directly with parents to improve our communication and our partnership with parents in all parts of this process. Now, while each of these small groups are working, there is going to be a larger group made up of parts of these small groups that will be looking at the overarching issues of accountability systems, information systems improvements, professional development strategy, and supervision structure. What we are seeking to do is what we feel is historically has happened is we've taken a very transactional view into how we fix things. There's all kinds of things. But within special ed, we're going to take a transformational approach to breaking each of these things down to make sustainable changes that will improve our overall system, not just now over the course of 3 years while we're making these changes, but to go forward so that we are educating every child in this district as if they are our own and making things that so all of our children can achieve success. So what you'll see is after these groups, a more detailed set of recommendations from each of these committees will come before the board as each committee finishes their work, and we will have to have resolutions to approve each set of recommendations. Are there, I know that was really quick, but I am mindful of all of your time and the commitments that you all have. Are there questions? Okay.
Just want to say I really appreciate your work. This is very thorough, and it sounds great.
Thank you. Commissioner LeBron?
Yes, the only question I have is the setting aside funds for the 18-19 school year to retain outside consultant to look at special education staffing.
Yes.
I just have an issue with us hiring more consultants over and over and over again to do work that people are already currently being paid in the district to do. And I would like to figure out a way that we strengthen that internally versus hiring someone else to do a job where we're already paying people to do internally. That's just my only feedback to that. But other than that, I support the whole entire project.
Okay. Commissioner Shepherd?
Yeah, I thank you for your work. I know you've been working real hard, especially the group that you were with as well, with it all being volunteer, so that was awesome. I just have a concern about our full compliance with the legal obligations within 3 years. Are we going to be working on that simultaneously as the work groups? Because
Yes.
I don't know if that's enough time to uproot a lot of the things that we have to fix. Is that set in stone? Can you talk to me about what that looks like?
What in the negotiations that we had, if we're making progress and we're doing it, we are going to work. That we had to put a stake in the ground and say there's a period of time. So 3 years is that period of time. But if we get to 2 years and we're making really good progress and we need more time beyond the 3 years, we can get that. But my thing is we had to put a stake in the ground to say this is how much time. And because what will happen is the recommendations will come out over the course of the next 6 months. Like all those groups are going to meet over the course of 6 months. We're not going to do them all at once. We're going to put them up 2 at a time because there's some people who are on multiple groups, so we don't want to tax our community to death. So, and everybody, like you said, is volunteer. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring these up, and we should be at least be able to make progress, if not finish. This is not a finished thing. Like you said, there's some things that's going to take longer, but we're going to start the implementation of all of these things, and we feel it was reasonable to say within 3 years. But if we don't make it, we can go back, and if we're doing the work, we can go back and say, you see that we're doing the work, we've made the progress, can we get an extension? And we can negotiate that at that point.
Okay, and my last question along that same line, is there anything that you can think of or that you can take back to the team in regards to what we should be doing with asking the state? Because some of the things that we are out of compliance with are like specialized services like OT, speech. There's a shortage, across the nation. If there are things or recommendations that you have for us as a board that we need to be looking at other levels of government to try to help see if we can secure funding or see how we can create a pipeline for that type of stuff. I just wanted to put that out there for you to keep that in mind.
Absolutely, and as the work groups as the small groups start working around the hows and we start seeing some of the barriers, we will be coming back and saying, these are things for resolution, but I will also charge them to look at advocacy opportunities that we can go forth with them for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner, Vice President Powell.
Thank you. So you touched on the teams, the 7 teams, and how they won't all be working at the same time. So I gather then that you have specific ideas of who would be on what teams. Do you have a timetable for gearing up those teams? When are we
After the resolution.
Oh, okay.
We're waiting on it. We're waiting on us.
So that'll be in our next board meeting?
Yes. So we're looking, what we told the chairs of the committees that we're looking to start in June. So we figured we get this, pass the resolution in the May board meeting. We do all the work and the group and the meeting, the chairs are ready to start. So we've already gone through, figured out who the chairs of each of the committees are, and then have some of the members, and then last Thursday, Yes, last Thursday, we went to CPAC and we got parent members. And there's some other people we want to add to those committees. So we're ready to start working as soon as we get the resolution.
That's great. Like our earlier presentation on the budget, this is very clean, very professional, and I really appreciate your capacity to organize and present.
But I would really like to thank the entire committee, and I'd like to give a shout out to Keisha Morgan, because the collaborative nature that we were able to do with the folk from Empire Justice, the community members, everyone coming together. What I understand is that being from community, we do this a lot. That's the way we get anything done in community, is through the collaboration. Doing it this way with the district is not the way that always happens. And people coming together and being able to lay aside preconceived notions and actually dream and hope a different way was really heartening to me. And I just want to thank and say for the record, I know Chuck is here and other folks are here, that I just want to say thank you on behalf of the kids and families for partnering with us and actually believing with us that we can fix this and we can do this. So I just want to say thank you. And I just want to say thank you to Keisha, to Deb, to the board staff, to everyone who has supported us in this process, because I know that it was working every week was a really aggressive schedule, and you guys kept up with us and you supported us when there were changes, and I really, 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 really thank you.
Let me just ask a couple of questions regarding the mechanics. So we've accepted this report as we're required to do by the bylaws. But then the next step in terms of follow-up would be a resolution in May, in the May business meeting? Is that what you anticipate?
That's what I'm anticipating, that there would be a resolution that we would go with Empire Justice to enter into the consent decree.
Okay, so the idea would be that you and Carl, you already have one of Carl's members of his team on the
yes,
special advisory
Dylan
committee,
is
right?
also, and I'm sorry, shout out to Dylan Pauly too.
Yep. And that you would devise a resolution that would include a proposed consent decree.
Yes.
That would detail some of this and sort of lay out generally what is going to happen in the future, including...
So the consent decree would lay out, like we said before, that would lay out this and say that we're agreeing to come into full compliance within the next 3 years, and that we will have these committees, and the committees will do the work. So it's laying this all out, and then we enter into it, and then we just start the work.
Okay.
So it's not like there's no special master, not all that other stuff,
Sure,
but just
sure.
this.
And then, and I don't know that you'll have this level of detail come the May meeting, but I'm going to be curious. I know I'll have questions about how central office will be integrated into this and the life of this plan to improve our special education system, because the reality is you and I and everybody up here is going to be gone when this system is finally fixed. It's going to take a while. It's going to take, as you know, more than 3 years. Right. So what is key in my mind is we got to make sure that the folks that we're paying our taxpayer dollars to educate our kids and make sure our children with special needs get across the finish line and get all the services they need. I want to make sure that central office is, and I know they are, but I think one of the problems we have is that, this is not a reflection on Barbara, but the district has not led this. And while we ask you and other people in the community to come in and help, sort of light a fire, ignite, institutionally, systemically, it has to be the district. It has to be the folks at central office. As I said, we're short-term timers here. We got to make sure that the systems are changed. So I don't know what that means in terms of consent decree or your point of view, but I just, while I and my colleagues recognize the abilities that you and others who are part of that committee have, in the end, you're not going to be involved in this forever. Right. There are going to be people whose salaries we pay that were responsible for the system getting the way that it got and are going to be responsible for fixing it. We've got to make sure that while the board led the effort to turn this system around by asking people in the community to help turn around, ultimately it's got to be people in this building and the school buildings throughout this city that make sure our children get what we need.
Absolutely. And I think part of the way we did this having Keisha as the director of special ed at the table from the beginning. One of the things that ends up happening historically is things get put upon people. If you build something with somebody, if we're all part of building it, it'll be stronger and it'll help to stand. So part of, as we go through each of these small groups, we will bring people in to their point of strength and build these, because each of these committees will be like a microcosm of the larger committee that will have district people, community people, parents, youth when we can, to do each of these things, and then we will institutionalize. Because that's when I said about transformational change. This is why we're taking this approach to it, to create a transformational change that is institutionalized so that we can do this. Because I think why you're saying because historically we've been very transactional in how we've approached it. So it's a whole new philosophy for how we do it for the House. So I have confidence that we will be able to do that, because we're gonna have the people part of it from the beginning of the building.
I want to say one other quick thing, and I know Commissioner Hallmark wants to say something, but to the Board of Education, we've often criticized for micromanaging and getting in the way of the folks in this building and throughout the district and doing their job. But I think this, along with the task force that resulted in our transforming the code of conduct, are examples of what boards of education can do when they don't just sit around on their hands and wait for somebody or a group of people to tell them what to do. We are no longer doing what Einstein said we shouldn't do, which is to repeat the same practices over and over again, expecting different results. This work that you're doing, this work that Mary Adams led, along with a lot of other people in the community, participated in leading that effort, are examples of what boards of education can do. And this is a model, by the way. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We impaneled a committee to look at whether we should have a military academy. That never happened, but we got people from throughout the community to dialogue on it, and the board ultimately, we never took a vote on it, but ultimately the board decided they didn't want to do it. But the process of engaging people throughout the community can produce legitimate results. The process is what will lead to transformational change. But again, I say that at the end of that process, we got to make sure that the folks in this building and every school building own this. And I like when you say, you know, the committees, we're going to make sure that the district, they're integrated into these programs. And I think we know you will do that because you did that when you got Keisha involved, right from the get-go. So I'm sorry, Commissioner Hallmark.
No problem. So I just wanted, for the record, to get a little bit of information for the public. If somebody could speak to, because we did have a consent decree for this district some years ago, and I'm curious, for the record, you know, when that started, how long it ran, when it stopped, what happened with our compliance while it was in process, what happened and how quickly after it stopped, the cost of this, just some details for the record. I'd appreciate that. Who can speak to it?
I believe the consent decree predates most people here.
I wasn't here when the consent decree was ordered. I was here on the board when it was declared to be satisfactorily completed. That was a great many special ed directors ago, and I think if I had to speculate on what happened since then, I would say atrophy comes, you know, just I hate to use the expression, but the soft bigotry of low expectations kicked in, and you know, okay, well, there's nobody watching over our shoulder anymore, so we don't have to behave ourselves anymore. That sort of thing. I don't think it was that many years ago that we came out from under it.
Was it within the last 10 years?
Yeah.
And do you know approximately how long it was in place?
You know, I see Jonathan sitting back there. This is an open
probably
meeting. If you
knows
want
that better than
to just
all
give
of
us a
us.
brief.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate it.
Hey,
Jonathan!
As Jonathan takes the mic, we had several meetings to I don't want to use the word negotiate, discuss the creation of the Special Advisory Committee, and of course, we wanted Empire Justice to be involved. And consistent with what Willa said, this is what I have learned, that the consent decree was in place. Jonathan can, of course, give us all the detail, but ultimately, I think I remember Brian saying in one of those meetings that we had that eventually, while there was some progress, the consent decree ended and people just backslid. That's my recollection of how Brian described how we got to where we were. And Jonathan was one of those people at the meeting where we were negotiating or talking about the creation of the Special Advisory Committee. You could say this for yourself, but somewhat cynical about us going down this road again. And I insisted that things were different. One reason was because of this leader sitting to my left. And I maintain that that's why I don't think, even with this new consent decree, if we get one, that we won't backslide, because one, I have leaders to my right and my left that will make sure that we go forward, and I think there's a commitment to make sure that the people that are salaried to protect and educate our children are an integral part of that system. But Jonathan, the history, could you?
Sure, I'll just speak briefly to the history.
Jonathan, could you introduce yourself for folk who don't know you?
Jonathan Feldman with Empire Justice Center. I work with Brian Hetherington, Mario Roque, who's also here, and Jane Gabriel. A number of us have been working on this for quite a while. We certainly appreciate all of your efforts on the committee and on the board to address this issue. We're very happy about that. So just in terms of the facts of when the consent decree happened, it was filed, I believe, in 1981. It was terminated by the district court, Judge Teleska, in 2002. We then appealed that to the Second Circuit and lost. It was actually, just for the record, it was his main reasoning of the decision was not that the district was in compliance. It was more of a technicality that he only had 3 years of jurisdiction under the most recent consent decree, and that 3 years had expired, and therefore we were out of luck. But he also did make some findings about that the district had made progress in certain areas, which we agreed with. So the district, up until 2002, we thought was making, some decent progress. But then I agree with Commissioner Powell. Once the consent decree was ended by the courts, we tried to keep putting pressure on, but it was much harder to I guess, get the district's attention. And so we're very happy that it's back in the attention of the district, those issues. Any other specific questions, or?
How complicated or technical is it to sort of get this started?
To get this started again? In terms of doing a new consent decree? I think we would have to hammer out some of the details, certainly, but I know that the committee has already started down that path and certainly announced a lot of the principles that would be governing the consent decree. So it's just a matter of if we're working amicably with the district to sit down and get some of those details in place.
So the first time it happened, Empire Justice sort of was the organization that hammered out the details to shape the consent decree.
It was our predecessor organization,
Okay.
I think Monroe County Legal Assistance Center, that then became Public Interest Law Office of Rochester, and then was renamed Empire Justice Center. But it's really the same organization, just different names.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for all your work, keeping us honest.
All right. So we'll hear again from you at our
At the business meeting. And if there are any other questions, just please feel free just to email me and let me know. Thank you.
Thank you again, Melanie. We really appreciate your work on this. Made a huge difference already. All right, so I think that ends our agenda items for this evening. We do have to go into a meeting with our lawyers. It's not deemed to be an executive session. It's a meeting for the purpose of receiving legal advice. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion.
Moved by Commissioner LeBron, seconded by Commissioner Funchess. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and good night.